Guns, germs, and steel. Those were the big three in our world. How would magic affect that? In the last episode, I talked about what a renaissance would look like in a fantasy world based off of Tolkien's Middle-earth. Now let's ask the question, what would colonialization look like? I'm mixing backstories here, but the general idea is that the continent that the humans live on is really the new-ish world, and the undiscovered continent is the old one, where the creatures of myth and the elves live. Our countries have been duking it out with the big bad guy and his armies for the past millennia, and because of this they've gained military technology that wouldn't have come about otherwise, especially magical military technology. The elves left the land back before the Renaissance, and they haven't been duking it out with the big bad for the past millennia, and so their magic, while powerful, isn't as technologically based as that of the humans. Humans have surpassed the elves simply because they fight more, because they get involved in more wars and thus have more room to experiment and improve upon their military tech. This results in an imbalance correlating with the one we see in our world, the one outlined in Jared Diamond's book Guns, Germs, and Steel. None of these three things are working in our world, however, as the elves have magic that can beat guns, they have magic that can heal most sicknesses, and they have magic that can make wood as tough and versatile as steel. So basically those three big factors that caused the domination of Europe over the Native Americans isn't there. However, Europe's magic more than makes up for that difference. While the elves have been rotting away in their old traditions, the traditions that have been passed down to them through the ancients, the humans have been using their technology scientifically, applying the scientific method to the use of magic. Their foot soldiers now come equipped with a device that allows even the most non-adept to match the power and force of an elvish noble. Let's call it the magic gun. The magic gun is simple enough for even an idiot to use, requires very little training, and can do massive damage to an unprotected enemy. There are several ways that this weapon can work, depending on what the magic of our world looks like. For example, if magic can be imbued in crystals or enchanted into objects, this weapon could just be a refinement of that technology to the point where anyone can use it. If complicated spells are what drives magic, then this could be a meta spell that allows the perfect memorization and deployment of any spell in combat. If magic is based organically, drawing power from humans and other living creatures, then the magic gun could look like a homunculus that attaches itself to a human and forms a bond. No matter what the form, the technological level wouldn't yet be at the destructive level of a machine gun, comparatively, because we're still in the colonial era here. So with their magic gun, the humans find the old elvish world and dominate it through technological prowess. However, that's not all it would take, as in our world the Native Americans were only easy to conquer because of smallpox and other diseases of the like. With death by disease out of the question for the immortal magic elves, another force has to come into play, and there are two options I can think of that would cause the death of the elves: runaway curses and the importation of the big bad. First off, let's tackle runaway curses, or more broadly, the side effects of a technologically magical society. In any magic system where humans have the ability to cause major changes to their environment with ease, there are going to be runaway spells that create massive damage to the environment, regardless of their source. So in a world where the disease has been eliminated, the new killer would be runaway magic spells that get out of hand and cause magical damage that can't be controlled by their creator. This could take the form of curses, mythical beasts, or just plain alterations to the fabric of reality. Playing with magic is dangerous because of its effect on the world. It's like giving every living human being the potential to cause a nuclear explosion. While the denizens of Middle-earth have been dealing with this problem for centuries, and thus have countermeasures built into their lives, and probably enchanted into their bodies at birth, the elves do not have this kind of resistance. And so a curse that causes every person that a cursed individual comes into contact with to go blind and die a slow, horrible death, which every baby born in the human world is enchanted with a resistance to, this would decimate the native elvish populations. So in summary, runaway curses are a new, more powerful disease mechanism that replaces the old one caused by microbes, which is entirely fabricated by the technological use of magic. The second possible decimator of the elves is the bringing of evil to the land of good. The elves have been living without an ancient powerful evil for most of their existence, since they eradicated it from their land millennia ago, and thus they've gotten soft. When the humans arrive in their territory, they bring with them the parasitic orcs, goblins, trolls, harpies, etc., etc., and with them the big bad guys that periodically arise in human territory and which humans have gotten good at defeating. This is kind of like how humans brought rats to the New World, which killed off the dodos. Orcs would be an invasive species, a species that is brought from another region and destroys the native ecosystem which hasn't adapted to its presence. This change would be too fast for the long-lived, slow-reproducing elves who haven't adapted to being killed off by a wave of evil every 50 years or so. To summarize this section, instead of bringing guns, germs, and steel to the New World and conquering it with that, the humans would bring technological magic, curses, and evil, though that doesn't sound as punchy as the famous line it replaces. Once the New World has been colonized and intercontinental trade begins, the world will develop into a mirror of what we saw in our history, where colonial powers would vie for control of resources and then use those resources to fight wars, both economic and physical. Only now, with instant communication possible through magic, the world becomes a globalized place much faster than before. The magical telephone would become a reality almost immediately after colonization, and that technology would be improved on until around the time of the American Revolution there would be a functioning internet. Now I know that sounds kind of crazy, but let me explain. It took around 100 years from the invention of the telephone to the invention of the internet, give or take. With the spreading out of empires thanks to colonialization, magical telephones would become an integral part of communication, regardless of their function. The reason for this is something called adjunct possibility. Adjunct possibility is the phrase used to describe a technology that is possible to create using means current to an age, but just hasn't been thought of yet. Telephones only became adjunct possible after telegraphs had been in use for almost 100 years, and telegraphs only became adjunct possible after electricity had been formalized for 100 years. With magic making instant communication possible across long distances even in its simplest form, telephones instantly become adjunct possible without all the intermediaries. And once communication technology has become possible, it advances at a rate caused by necessity. So a magical civilization would become data-driven much sooner than our civilization did, simply because it could. I can imagine YouTube or its analog becoming a reality around the time that trains started popping up, right at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. With advances in communication technology would come advances in warfighting. World wars would become possible where before they were only a collection of wars fought around the world, not a single unified war where every battle was part of the whole. If you think about it, the world wars were only possible because of communication technology, which allowed coordination over long distances. With the telephone being in use around the time that the Elvish domains were being colonized, wars like the 7 Years' War or the French Revolution would have the ability to escalate much more than before. This would be possible not only because of communication technology, but also because of advanced ship technology. With magic able to propel objects at great speeds even at low levels of technological advancement, there would no longer be a need for complicated steam engines to drive ships faster. All you would need is an aeromancer for every ship, and you could be cruising along at a rate relative to today's warships with a galleon built in the 17th century style. You could use clairvoyant pathfinding like a GPS system that would allow you to plot courses more efficiently, and it would probably be possible to cross the ocean between the continents in less than a week, maybe 50 years after it would be discovered. All this means that the advancement of mundane technology would take a backseat to magical technology, and since galleons work perfectly well with wind magic and shielding magic, they probably wouldn't change at all. I could imagine a civilization such as this building their spaceships out of wood and simply using magic to make them run. Hell, I could imagine them taking ships into space that weren't even designed to leave the water, but we're not there yet. So the end result of colonization is that the world becomes a globalized data culture before it becomes an industrial one. Before there are factories, there would be data transfer like that we see today, which would of course accelerate the physical industrial revolution, but in some ways it would hinder it. We'll talk about that next time. The First World War would happen much sooner than in our world, and it would be much more destructive, both sides using magical weapons of mass destruction with power comparative to nuclear bombs. MAD, or mutually assured destruction, would be a problem during the American Revolution or its analog. Since we won't have anything to talk about if this world destroys itself, we'll assume that it finds some clever way around MAD so it doesn't become a problem anymore, probably through some massive spell that limits the power of destructive magic. The last thing I want to talk about is what the economy and law of such a civilization would look like. Since magic can make automatons or homunculi, there would be no need for slaves to operate the plantations of the Elvish domains, and there would be no need for slaves to do the dirty work that humans just don't want to do. These automatons would possess minimal intelligence intelligence, just enough to do the job, but at the same time that wouldn't be perfect. While this neo-slavery would eventually be outlawed for moral reasons, it wouldn't happen for a long while, and it probably would never disappear altogether, just becoming more focused as the homunculi are created with less and less consciousness, until they basically become like horses. We don't feel bad about making horses work without pay, and neither would they. Trade would become huge in a civilization like this, especially if they have teleport magic. With teleport magic, you don't even need to ship your goods, you can just import them to wherever you need them. This would eliminate the need for huge fleets of ships and eventually eliminate the need for them altogether. While it would probably take a while for teleport magic to become the mainstay of travel and economy, it would most definitely eventually become the sole means of transport, making even traveling by flight obsolete before the invention of airplanes. In fact, in a society like this, airplanes would probably never even be invented because they aren't needed. A simple flying spell would turn any galleon into a skyship, and most non-teleportation travel would occur in the air far, far before airplanes were invented in our world, simply because there is less resistance in the atmosphere as opposed to the ocean. As well as this, you can travel over land using airships, which would render most forms of land transport obsolete. So the magical world would become globalized much sooner than our world because magic is simply so versatile as a tool. Nationalism wouldn't have much time to become a thing before peace would be more profitable than war, and nations would dissolve into a unified government because communications and travel would make the world a very small place, where national borders have no use. There would still be wars, and they would be huge, but something along the lines of a UN but with more power would probably be in place before the colonies had a reason to revolt. With distance being unimportant, any colony would become part of its parent country in a way that isn't even possible today. Democracy would appear because of the empowerment of the individual through magic. When most individuals have access to power equivalent to entire armies in our world, individualist philosophies would tend to become dominant. The world wouldn't be peaceful, not by a long shot, but right about the time of the Industrial Revolution, most conflict about reasons we fight about today would be gone, replaced instead by the periodic conflicts with pure evil. The world of a magic civilization would look quite alien to us, a mixture of old technology and super powerful being common. With the power of magic, civilizations would soon enter into a revolution that would make our industrial revolution look like a cup of water next to the world's oceans. Come back next time for the third installment in this series, The Revolution of Magical Industry.